we will diagnose 40,000 men this year. So that's an awful lot of men who are going to live with that diagnosis for the next 10, 15 years, perhaps even more. So it's a lot of men. The problem is that those men are not always the most healthy men to start with. And the average age would be early 70s actually. So, and probably 7 out of 10 will be overweight. A similar percentage will be inactive. So we're starting with a cohort of men probably a bit overweight and pretty inactive. And we know there's a lot that they can do to improve their outlook, because if we can motivate them to be active and motivate them to keep their weight down or ideally lose weight, then we know that that will reduce their risk of dying by about 1/3. It'll reduce their risk of recurrence by about 1/2, and reduce their risk of having a cardiovascular complication by about 2/3. So there's a lot of benefit for men. I often say, I'm going to do my very best for you, we'll give you the best treatment we've got, but what you do is actually more important than what I do. And if we can work together, you're going to get the double benefit of me choosing the right drug at the right time and you doing your bit, which will be very complementary to what I do. What I like them to do is to walk for half an hour twice a day, to do some resistance exercise as well, and to have a healthy Mediterranean style diet with plenty of fresh fruit, vegetables, salads and fish, and keeping away from cakes, pies, pastries, puddings, concentrated dairy products and sweets, and to avoid processed meat as much as possible. And actually that's not a bad diet, and I have an example on my computer that I print out for them. It's the Mediterranean diet pyramid, and the one I choose is the one that's got people exercising on the bottom twice a day and eating their meals slowly in company, so they chew their food very often so that they feel more satisfied and less urge to eat more. And then it's got pictures of fruit, vegetables, salads, and not too much carbohydrate. And then you get the fish, and then you get the eggs and cream and cheese, and then you get the red meat and the sweet right at the top. And they're allowed to have a glass of wine if they want. Around 35% will actually succumb to a heart attack or a stroke. So that's a large number of men that we could potentially save by giving them adequate cardiovascular risk management. The treatments for prostate cancer often involve hormone manipulation. So we take away testosterone, but unfortunately once you do that, it encourages the body to store abdominal fat. So we end up in a very vicious cycle of giving a treatment which we know will stop the cancer growing and make it less likely to come back, but in the process making these men more vulnerable to the metabolic syndrome, which essentially is the blood sugar goes up a bit, the blood fat goes up a bit, the cholesterol and triglycerides, the blood pressure goes up a bit. So you have this triad of slightly higher blood pressure, slightly higher blood sugar, slightly higher cholesterol, all of which lead to risk of cardiac disease and diabetes. So with one hand we're treating a cancer, but with the other hand we're making these men vulnerable to cardiovascular disease, which is often they already are because of their age. It's driven by age a lot, and if they're smoking on top, that's extremely dangerous. So one of the first things I say to these men is that we're going to give you some treatment which is going to take away your testosterone, and that's going to put you at risk of developing possible diabetes and having a greater risk of heart disease and stroke. So what we need to do right from day one is stop you gaining weight and get you more active, and you need to be eating a healthy Mediterranean-style diet, because we know that a Mediterranean-style diet reduces the risk of the metabolic syndrome. And there was a recent study in Spain, which is a 5-year study, and they compared the Mediterranean diet with a low-fat diet. And in fact, over 5 years, the reduction in risk of both heart attack and stroke was getting on for 25%. And on top of that, when they actually looked at the group of men who had the metabolic syndrome, if they had the Mediterranean diet, around about a quarter of them had reversal of it on the Mediterranean diet. So the diet will not only prevent heart disease and strokes, but it also will prevent progression to the metabolic syndromes. So it has a double benefit. If we look at the research, particularly a paper published in 2011, we know that for men who exercise for an hour a day, reduces their risk of dying by a third. If they do 3 hours exercise a week, it reduces their risk of a recurrence by about half, 50%, and reduces their risk of having a heart attack or a stroke by 2/3. So you've got huge benefits from just doing a bit of extra exercise. Exercise works by increasing your insulin sensitivity. And when these men gain central abdominal weight, they become insulin resistant. So insulin levels go up to try and overcome that resistance. And so does IGF. Now, IGF's a growth factor, and that's probably partly contributing to the aggressiveness of the tumour. So I try and explain to these men that if they are able to exercise, it's not only going to reduce the risk of the cancer recurring, it's going to make it less likely that the recurrence will be aggressive. So they really get two benefits. One is a less likelihood of recurrence. If they get a recurrence, it'll be less aggressive, and they reduce their risk of cardiovascular disease, all by doing something which they should be able to do themselves in terms of taking more exercise. We must remember that these men are in their 70s very often. So you need to think, well, what can you do? And it may need to be swimming because their knees have gone, or it may need to be cycling if their knees have gone. It might be just a walk. So I think there's almost something for almost everybody, but you need to identify, again, it comes back to that motivation. How motivated are you to get a season ticket for the swimming pool and go there every morning? We know that making lifestyle changes is really difficult. But I think when someone's told they have cancer, it's a bit of a magic moment in terms of thinking about, well, I perhaps need to change something. Because unfortunately, we know that being overweight and being inactive increases your risk of cancer. But once you've got a diagnosis, then I think people start to think, why have I got this? Why has it happened to me? And if you explain how the abnormal metabolism drives the risk of cancer, and then how, if they change their level of exercise and they change what they eat, that it's going to reduce their risk of getting a recurrence, having a less aggressive recurrence if they do, and also getting the cardiovascular benefits at the same time. So I think it's a matter of understanding that this is a moment, unfortunately you've got a diagnosis of cancer, but there's a lot that you can do about it to really make a difference. I always try and encourage the men to come along with their partner, and for same-sex couples, their partner too. And I like to find out who does the shopping, I like to find out who does the cooking, I like to find out what they're doing at the moment, and I need to find out whether they're prepared to change, whether they're motivated to change. And once I've found that out, it helps me describe to them what they need to do. And what I'm trying to do during the conversation that we have together is motivating the partner to support their husband who has prostate cancer in making the changes that he needs to make to give him the best chance of not only recovering from the cancer, but reducing the risk of recurrence and reducing the risk of an aggressive recurrence. But I think once they understand that what they are going to do together is so important and can make such a difference, that it's much more likely they will be concordant with my advice and follow it. A diagnosis that's going to come as an awful shock. That is, in fact, a magic moment for the doctor to try and encourage that person to change things in their life that can really make a difference. And that is by taking more exercise and eating a healthy Mediterranean diet. And part of the process is helping them understand why they need to make that change and how they'll make that change, but not expecting it all to happen at once, because it's a gradual process of understanding and becoming motivated to really take command of this illness and really make a difference yourself. And I say to people repeatedly, what you do is more important than what I do. We'll do our really best for you, but what you do is going to be more important than what I do. So you've got to do this.